Okay. Alrighty. Again, I'm Ryan. I'll be teaching some more reading and writing today. So first, we'll just kind of start off with a review. And if you guys have any questions about anything on the uh, like last week or 2 weeks ago session now, please feel free to ask. Uh, so yeah, I'll kind of review quick the things we went over. So first, we went over independent versus dependent clauses, and these were like essential for figuring out what punctuation to use. So an independent clause is something that can be a sentence on its own, whereas a dependent clause is something that needs more added to it in order to be a complete sentence. And there's often like key indicator words like after or although or while she was running. That's not a complete thought, right? We need something more added to that in order for it to be a complete thought. Um, then we also went over punctuation. So that was commas, semicolons, colons, and dashes. There's a lot of rules there. So if you guys have any questions on any of those, love for you guys to ask. Uh, Next, we went over some agreement stuff. So subject verb agreement. All verbs have to agree in number and tense with their subject. So we would say he ran and they run. Or that was actually a weird example, or like I ran. Bunch of different subject verb agreement there that we have to look out for. And kind of tying into that is pronoun agreement. So again, with pronouns, they have to agree on number, and they also have to be clear. Like we have to know what the pronoun is referring to. He's also worked with the each is one body words. Those words kind of took one thing out of the group and then talked about them. So even though it might be referring to like multiple people, it's still singular. And then we also looked at tense agreement. So this is like past, present, future. Modifier agreement. So everything that is being modified, so usually the noun or what's being modified has to be as close as possible to the thing that it's modifying. Um, yeah. And then parallelism. So we want everything to be said in the same way, kind of have like the same flow, especially in like lists. And then finally, we went over word choice. So the two big ones here I'll stress are like concision and precision. So concision, we want everything to be as concise as possible. We want it to be straightforward and short. So if you're ever between a few answers, always choose the shortest one. And then precision, so that's everything needs to be said in a precise way. Like if someone reading the text might not understand what's going on, then it needs to be more precise. We want it to be very clear what is happening in the text. And adjectives and adverbs, the difference between those, so like ly at the end, so like gentle versus gently. Comparatives and superlatives. Comparatives are when you're comparing two things. So he is bigger than John. He is faster than John. Whereas superlatives are the biggest, strongest, fastest. That's when you're comparing three or more things. Finally, misused words and vocabulary. So we went through some of the most common, like tested words there. Yeah. Any questions on any of that stuff, or if you guys have done any practice throughout the last couple weeks, what's kind of come up there? Okay. All right. So we'll do some practice quick. I'll just share my screen. Uh, I have a little practice test. Okay, so I'm gonna scroll back to where it was. All right. Back. Okay, so we'll start out with these first 5 questions here. Try and zoom in a little bit. So we'll just go through one at a time for these ones just because there's kind of practice, but this is like an actual PSAT digital exam. Um, so it tells you kind of what they're they're going to look like. And this is off of the College Board website. So this is exactly what they'll look like. We'll start with this first one here. I'll give you all kind of a minute to read through it and answer the question. Okay. Naomi, what are you thinking for this first one?
I was thinking B.
Yeah, that's right here. Also, like a good tip, I think we kind of went over how to answer these questions, but I always like to read the like question first because this really tells you what you're supposed to look for when looking through the passage. Especially like with these vocabulary ones, you don't need to read like a lot of this part and you can save some time doing that. So I just usually skip to here and it says, as used in the text, what does the phrase void most nearly mean? So then you can kind of skip to like, I just skipped to this sentence here and read it. And if you need more, you can go look for more. But I really suggest reading the question first on these ones. So yeah, perfect. All right, number two, take a minute to look at that one. Jody, what do you think for that one?
Sorry, my name's Macy. I just don't know how to change
Oh,
it.
okay. Sorry.
D. I think it's D.
Yep, perfect. Okay, yeah, creating there again. Um, yeah, read the question, and we know we probably don't have to read that whole thing. This one's pretty short, so it wasn't that bad. But also, you can see here that on this PSAT, unlike some of other like standardized tests, they group question types together. So this is like asking about word choice. This is asking about word choice. They group those similar question types together, which is pretty helpful because it keeps your mind like in that frame of thinking, like what to be looking for. So yeah. Okay, three. Yeah. Claire, what do you think for this one?
Efficient.
Yep, perfect. Okay, and we'll do these next two as well. So four. Giuseppe, what do you think for this one?
B.
Yep, perfect. And number five. Cole, what do you think for number 5?
B. Or no, A, sorry.
Yeah, A is correct. Okay, perfect. Yeah, 19 through 26. Okay, so those were like the word choice ones. Now here's more like the grammar ones. And yeah, we can see how they're worded. It always like they always say the same thing. Which choice best or completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English. So these ones will take a little bit more to like figure out what the question's actually asking you to do, whether that's like punctuation, verb agreement. So again, we can use our tips like from before to look at what's changing in the answer choices. Obviously, read the question or read the sentence. Again, in this one, I wouldn't, when it says standard English conventions, you don't need to read the whole paragraph usually. I usually just skip to the sentence. Um, so yeah, go ahead and start out with this one. Okay. Naomi, what do you think for this one?
C.
Yeah, perfect. So this one's pretty straightforward, but it's just that verb agreement here. I want it to be in the past tense. So yeah. Okay, 20, that one. Jody, what do you think for this one? Or sorry, Macy.
C.
Yep, perfect. 21. Claire, what do you think for this one?
A.
Yep. Yeah, so this is that subject verb agreement. So the radiation is our subject and occurs is the verb. Okay, 22. Giuseppe, what do you think for this one?
B.
Yep, perfect. So yeah, this tense agreement again. Everything's in the past tense. Perfect. Okay. And we can see like all of these were pretty much like agreement issues and like verbs. And now it's going to kind of switch. I mean, again, looking at the answer choices, we can see everything here is just that, but it's a different comma, colon, uh, different punctuation there. So yeah, go ahead and answer that one. Cole, what do you think for this one?
Would it be, this is confusing. Would it be C?
Yeah, so this one's that comma hug. Again, the way to test that is we can read it without the part in the commas. So if we just read polyphenols are organic compounds that provide pigment that helps plants or protect plants, that's like a complete thought, right? It makes sense. Um, so we don't need this like among their many roles. That's the interrupting phrase. So we need to hug that with the commas. Cool. 24. Naomi, what do you think for this one?
Is it A?
Yeah, perfect. So here we're just testing that apostrophe. There's no really possessive part here. Uh, it's just multiple musicians and multiple audiences. Oh, yep. Okay. 25. Macy, what do we think for this one?
B.
Yep. So that first part there is the introductory phrase. It's a dependent clause. While filming a boxing match for the movie Body and Soul. So it needs something after that to like complete the sentence. And the second part, How had a handheld camera operator wear roller skates? That is the independent clause. So we need a comma to separate those. Okay. 26. Right. Claire, what do you think for this one?
D.
Sorry, what'd you say?
D.
I didn't quite hear you again, but D is the correct answer. I don't know if that's what you said, but um here it should be was. Because the subject here is amplifying the voices, and that's what was important to Chester. So amplifying the voices was important to Chester. So yeah, make sure to find that subject there. But yeah, perfect. Think yeah, that was the last one there. Are there any questions on uh we'll do this review later if we have time, the rest of that one. But are there any questions on those practice examples there or any of the review? Okay, perfect. Hopefully that kind of gives you a good idea of like what the actual test looks like too. Uh, yeah. Next, we'll kind of move on to some of the like more reading questions. So we've all been covering like more grammar style, but now there's also reading questions where they ask you to find the purpose of the text or the main idea or make an inference, something like that. So it is an open book test, right? They give you the passage that you have to look for. So there's no guessing and there's no prior knowledge that you need to know. They're just testing your ability to read and comprehend that text. Okay, so first, again, like always, we have to understand what the question is asking about. And then we always want to find evidence or like a detail in the text that would suggest our answer choice or clearly states the answer choice that we want. And then we can predict the answer and select the best answer that matches up. And also, like always, if we're ever unsure, just use your process of elimination and circle it and save it for later. Time is a big thing on the PSAT, so make sure to manage your time wisely. And if a question's taking way too long, don't like let it ruin the whole test. Okay, so for the first type of questions that we have are these information and ideas questions. So this is copied straight from the College Board website. It says, questions in this domain measure comprehension, analysis, and reasoning skills, and knowledge and the ability to locate, interpret, evaluate, and integrate information to evaluate central ideas and details, show command of evidence from text, tables, bar graphs, and line graphs, and make inferences. Okay, so basically what they're saying is you're gonna find like the main idea, find details or facts to back up a claim, and then also it may sound weird, but in the reading and writing section, because there's no science section, they test some like tables and bar graphs as well. So we have to be able to read some graphs there. And then finally make inferences. And when I say make inferences, it's not that we are completely guessing. You have to look at the text and find evidence to support that inference. As I said, there's always evidence in the text. You should never be guessing there. Okay, so first up, main idea. These questions always ask about the big picture of the passage. So the central claim, what the author is talking about. These always look like which choice best states the main idea of the text or the central claim of the text, something like that. So how to answer these? We basically want to summarize the main point of what the author is saying. This is usually found in either like the first or last sentence of the paragraph. So initially I might look there, but not always. And for these ones, it is pretty important to at least skim, if not read the entire passage to actually answer this question, unlike those more grammar type questions. Also, a lot of times they will try to like trick you by like saying the main idea is one small detail in the text. So make sure, even if you just find like a small piece of evidence, make sure like the whole text is talking about that, not just one sentence. Because if they see you're just like skimming or something, they might try and trick you like that. Okay, so this example here, have everybody read through this, but I'll go through the answer. So yeah. Okay, so if we read the first sentence here, it kind of gives you the overall main idea. And archaeologists have discovered a runestone in Norway. Uh, So that B here is probably the correct answer, but I would recommend reading the rest of it because it may not just be that. Um, the second sentence here, if I were to summarize it, just talks about like a little bit about carbon dating, but that's obviously not like the main focus. Um, So a new method for dating rocks would not be the example here. Most of the paragraph is just kind of relating to this stone. And next, runologist Crystal Zilmer um, believes that it might be helpful in learning this language. So obviously it's not about battles. And there's a small detail about the research interests of this guy, but that is still relating back to the stone at the start. So the overall theme is talking about this rune stone. Okay. Next up, we have detail questions. These are specifically looking for facts or details stated directly in the text. They'll look like according to the information in the passage, or the passage indicates that blah blah blah. So for these, we want to specifically look directly back in the text and find the evidence that is given to us. Okay, I'll give everyone a minute to look at this again. Okay. For this one, it kind of mentions all of these things in the paragraph. So again, if you're going really quick and just skimming, probably going to get this one wrong. But we just kind of got to find the one where it's actually talking about. So she possessed a voice that was clear and polished. It says opposite of that. Um, she had a raspy voice. She avoided songs written from a male. It says the opposite of that again. She would perform classic music that had been written from male point of view. Again, classic songs that said in the same sentence. So I guess that leaves us with D, but we should probably make sure. She altered classic songs by slowing them down. She also altered those songs by performing them much more slowly than other ranchero singers. So D would be the correct answer there. Pretty straightforward on that one. Okay. Next up, command of evidence. So this is asking you to find like some evidence to support a claim. Which finding from the experiment, if true, would best support the claim is typically something like that. And these a lot of times have to do with like sometimes looking at graphs. I see these questions with those a lot. So this one's a bit of a longer one, but let's take a look at this. Okay. So this one kind of have to find the hypothesis or like their claim here, as well as what evidence would best support that. So if we read in this sentence here, it said Garza and Robles hypothesized that a layer of fresh water formed by rainfall was a barrier to the sea stars. So basically, that's why they like wouldn't climb any higher on the shore. And then their hypothesis or their experiment was that they placed some sea stars in a tank of only seawater and others in one with seawater at the bottom and then fresh water at top. And then they wanted to see like basically where they would climb. So B here would be our best answer. So the ones with the sea stars in the tank with only seawater, they climbed all the way to the top. But the ones that were in both the seawater and the freshwater, they did not climb to the top, only to that freshwater. So yeah. Okay, any questions on those question types? Or any of those few examples we've just done? Okay. If there are no questions, we can move on to graphs. So yeah, on the PSAT, there actually are a couple graph questions. They usually just reference a graph and there's usually some small text with the graph as well that you have to read. Where it says which choice most effectively uses data from the table. So the first thing I would say is to fully understand the graph. So read the title, read the axes, read the units, and just kind of try to get like a general understanding of what the graph is telling you and like maybe some general trends. And finally, or next, understand what the question is asking you. So again, look at the graph or read the question and then look at the graph specifically for what that question is asking you. And you should be able to find the answer pretty easy. So first up, we'll kind of just like analyze these graphs. So just look at this graph for like 30 seconds, and then try to come up like with a summary of what this graph is saying. Uh, Yeah. Okay. So just from you looking at this graph, obviously the title is like a big clue of what this is. They're testing different fertilizers on how much they help beans grow. And then the bottom axis here is the height in centimeters. This left axis is just different types of fertilizers. You can see that one thing that stood out to me was that Miracle Grow was worse than having no fertilizer at all. So yeah. Okay. Do the same thing for this one. This one's a bit more tricky. Okay. Um, so I'm not sure what the RCRF is, but it looks like we're looking at whatever the monthly percent of clouds versus the RCRF over quite of a long period here, right? Like 15 years. And it's the monthly average for each year. So another thing I noticed was that they kind of seem to be inversely related, right? If this one goes down, then this one goes up. Um, so that might be something they look for, or something like that. We also have the double axis here. So the dotted line refers to the average cover of clouds, which would be this axis. So it's between 19 and 21%. And the RCRF percent. Oh, sorry. See, I read that wrong. So they're not actually inversely related because this graph is flipped upside down. So if you flip that to the right side up, then they would actually be increasing and decreasing kind of at the same time. So yeah, some tricky like that. Okay, so here's an actual question from the PSAT. I'll give you guys a minute to look at this and answer this. Okay, so this one would be A. The reason for that is it's saying in 2010. So we gotta look at that 2010 there. Um, and then this bar here is the computer services. So it's higher than the number in the technical consulting in 2010. And then this is going to be higher than, or was about the same as the number of jobs of engineering in 2019. So A would be correct there. Cool. Any questions on like how to read a graph or just general questions there? Yep.
So is it asking you to compare like all of 2010 and 2019, or is it just asking like to also compare 2019 and 2019? Does that make
Yeah, I
sense?
mean, this question was probably pretty tricky, but I think it would be the 2010 here. Um, so it's directly saying the number of jobs in computer services in 2010. So we're specifically looking at 2010 computer services, which would be this column. But I get like what you're saying, like, well, then it doesn't want you to compare this one, like in the second statement. Uh, yeah, but I think because it directly says that here, we would stick with this first column. So yeah. Okay. I think this is one of the final. Okay, this is the next type of question. So what we just went over, all of those were the information and ideas types of questions. Uh, so yeah, next up is going to be these infer, imply, suggest questions. Again, this is copied directly from the website. This is a question that asks about the points that, or sorry, we're not quite there yet. Sorry, the craft and structure is the next type of question. This is a part of the one before. That aren't directly stated in text, but they strongly implied. So again, we want to look for evidence here and then use that evidence to help us with our inference. So we're going back in the text and looking for that evidence to find our inference. Okay, this is the final question type for this. And yeah, we can see here like the question stem is, what does the text most strongly suggest about the songs sung by Rainey and Smith? So it's not directly stated, but it's strongly suggesting something. Okay. For this one, it would probably be C, just because all the other ones are kind of comparing the two, but he never really like says anything comparing them. Like this first one, or sorry, B and C, B and D, there were more recordings from Rainey songs than there were of Smith's. There's not really like anything that would indicate that in this text. It's not comparing. And then D, according to Davis, the songs sung by Rainey were more musically innovative. So again, there's no like really comparison between two. And then A, the songs have grown in popularity since Rainey and Smith first sang them. There hasn't really been any like there wasn't really anything said about how popular the songs were. So then that kind of leaves us with C here, but we can also look at the text and it shows how he is listening to the vinyl recordings to write them down. So we can infer that they were nothing that had already been written. So yeah. Cool. Okay. Now that's the last one for the uh, information and ideas types of questions. So now we can move on to craft and structure. So this is the part directly copied from the website. Questions in this domain measure the comprehension, vocabulary, analysis, synthesis, and reasoning skills and knowledge needed to understand and use high utility words and phrases in context, evaluate the structure and purpose of text, make connections between topically related texts. Okay. So it's kind of like the word choice that we were just looking at, or where it says like, what would be the best word or phrase to put in this spot? And then the purpose of the text is similar to the main idea, but instead of main idea, it's like, why is the author writing this? And then the next part, make connections between topically related texts. Sometimes there's dual passages where we have to like compare what two authors are thinking, or looking at a graph in a text as well. Okay, so vocab and context is kind of what we did, but it's a little different than like the misused vocabulary questions. So it's asking about the meaning of the word as it is used in the passage. So it's used in the passage, complex most nearly means. So usually what I do to answer these questions is I replace the word in context with the other answer choices and select the one that best matches the meaning of the original word. So that's pretty straightforward, but we can kind of look at this example to do that. So here, as used in the text, what does the word determine most nearly mean? So those who exist, again, like because it's just a like word question, we don't really have to read all this unless we think we do after reading the last sentence. So those who exhibited his work, who praised and purchased it, and who demanded its proliferation began to determine it. Okay, so what does that mean? So I would replace it with began to conclude it, began to dictate it, began to evaluate it, began to select it. Honestly, here I might want to read a tiny bit more just to like see what these people were doing. So I might read the first sentence here as well. More and more often, he was asked to compromise his art or himself in one way or another. And more often than not, he did so, for he was inclined to be passive and naive. It was difficult for him to say no. Okay, so that kind of like indicates what's happening, right? The people who are asking him to write are like telling him to do these things, even though he doesn't want to. So if we replace this, that would seem like dictate what he's doing. And that also, just by replacing the word, kind of makes the most sense there. So B. Okay, questions about those word choice ones? I think we did pretty good in the practice at the start. Okay. Next up is function questions. These ask like why the author wrote a particular part. Function or purpose is another way to say that. So which choice best states the main purpose of the text? Which choice best states the function of the underlined section in the text as a whole? So the first thing I try to do is like figure out what the author's claim or argument here is, and then you can see like why would they do it. So yeah, is the author trying to argue? Are they trying to explain something? Are they trying to persuade you to do something? Yeah, and that really comes from looking at the main idea and then finding why they would do that. Okay, so let's just look at this one. And typically here again, we do have to read the whole entire text. So yeah, I read the question and it says main purpose. So I would read the whole text here. We can do that. A study by Dr. Paul Hanel and colleagues concluded that people are more likely to behave politely when listening to ideas they disagree with if they think about values before they engage in a discussion. Study participants were assigned to one of two groups. The experimental group spent a few minutes writing about one of their personal values before they had a group discussion on a controversial topic. And the control group spent a few minutes writing about a drink, tea, milk, etc. before their group discussion on that topic. Hale and colleagues found that the experimental group's discussion was more civil than the control group's discussion was. Okay, so if I just had to like guess what the purpose of this is like explaining like an experiment. So Now I'm just going to read the answer choices and kind of try to find one that matches up or like best uses the text to answer that. To describe a widely held belief and how a study's result supported that belief. Uh, it could potentially be that one, but I don't know if it's like a widely held belief. It never really mentions that. To argue that researchers were surprised by the results of a certain study. They weren't surprised because that's what they had predicted, and it doesn't ever say anything about them being surprised. To suggest ways to improve a certain study's experimental design. It's not trying to change the design at all. To explain a study's conclusion and how a research team arrived at that conclusion. Yeah, that's what I would go with there. Explaining, that's kind of the key word that I would use to describe this text. It's not really arguing or persuading you to do anything. It's kind of just an explanation. Any questions on that? Okay, cool. Okay. Next up, we got multiple passage questions. So these usually refer to two different texts, and asks like how the connection is between them, like comparing and contrasting what the authors think or what the texts say about something. So you have to make sure you understand the main idea of both texts, and then look at evidence from both texts to keep their viewpoints straight. Okay. All right. Think we'll take like our short break there. That's kind of a good time to take a break. We'll do like a 5 minute break and then come back, finish up the last part of the like question types here, and then we'll get into some like actual more practice. I think will be good. So yeah. All right. 5 minute break. Okay. So now the final question type is called the expression of ideas. So College Board states that these questions or questions in this domain measure the ability to revise text to improve the effectiveness of written expression and to meet specific rhetoric goals. So I kind of divide these questions up into synthesis and transition questions. Synthesis questions, I mean, it's probably the next one, but yeah, synthesis questions here ask you to combine evidence, or like use the text to accomplish a specific goal. Typically, these questions look like which choice most effectively uses the information from the notes to accomplish this goal. So there will be a list of notes, and then we have to combine those to like say the main idea or whatever the question asks us to do. And we'll look at one of those together. But essentially, we just want to bring the information together in the most logical way to create one new idea. So let's look at this here. Again, let's read the question first. So the student wants to emphasize whose point of view the novel is told from. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? So let's just read the notes here. The Ramayana is a Sanskrit epic poem from ancient India. The character Kiki is often portrayed as a villain. Kiki is a 2022 novel by Vaishnavi Patel. The novel is a retelling of the epic poem from KK's point of view. It often portrays KK as heroic. Okay, so it's obviously told from this person's point of view, KK. So we want to use the relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal. From the point of view of the Ramayana, the character. So we're just trying to like summarize one key point to show who the novel is told from. And it's obviously her. Yeah. KK is retelling of the Ramayana from the character KK's point of view. Yeah, that's the one that probably summarizes it the best. So KK here is written by this guy, and it's retelling this story from her point of view. All of these don't really accomplish like what the thing is asking us to do. So the most important thing here is really just understanding what they want you to do with this information, because all of this stuff was said in there. It's just what do they want us to do here? Okay. And then next up, transition. So this is just connecting sentences and paragraph using the correct word. So what I like to do is read the paragraphs before and after, or sentences before and after. Just like ask yourself, how do these relate to each other? Are they contrasting? So are they a continuation of what was happening? Is it a cause and effect relationship? Is there like emphasis being placed on the next thing? Is it just a chronological order, like first, second, next? So kind of just think about how the two parts of the sentence relate to each other, and the transition word should become pretty easy. So I have a little bit of practice for these. First up, an example. Making a Murderer is a riveting documentary. Also, it sheds light on the criminal justice system. So here, Making a Murderer is a riveting documentary, just talking about someone's opinion on this documentary. And then this is talking about what the documentary does. So those like don't really like relate to each other. So it's kind of just another fact added on. So there also would be a good transition word. Chris is an extremely popular singer. His voice isn't very good. Those two are like contrasting things. So we need like a contrasting transition word there. So that would be, however, his voice isn't very good. The weather is warm. I'm wearing shorts today. Those two things are like a cause and effect. So there we would say because the weather is warm. Okay. Give you guys a minute to look at this one. So for this one, I'd probably say for this reason. So it's kind of just relating the two there. It shows the example. Okay, I'll let you guys practice these ones. These should be pretty quick. I'll call on people for these. All right, Cole, what do you think for this first one?
It would be C.
Yep. Macy, number 2.
A.
Yep. Perfect. Look these ones as well.
End on video. Absolutely gut-wrenching.
Naomi, do you want to do number 3 here?
B.
Yep. And Claire, number 4.
B.
Yep, perfect. Okay, perfect. So that's kind of like all the new content that we're covering today. But does anybody have questions on that before we get into some more PSAT practice? Okay, cool. I think this will be like the most helpful thing. I think practice is kind of where you get the most out of stuff. So we'll finish up like the rest of those questions from the first module, and then I'll have you guys do the second module kind of as like a timed thing. So we go to here. We did 1 through 5 first, so we can just do verse 6 to start. You guys still read that? Or is that too small?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just go ahead and do both 6 and 7 here. I'll give you guys a few minutes to do those. Okay. Macy, what do you think for 6?
I said D.
Yeah, perfect. D would be the correct answer here. Um, and we can kind of see their different personalities uh, between these 2 paragraphs. And reveled in a world of color about her. Uh, and it talks about like she's so excited and everything's gorgeous. And then these are messy, um, clutter up your room, just kind of more pessimistic. Shows the difference there. Uh, okay. And then 7, Giuseppe, what do you think for that one?
A.
Yeah, perfect. This one is mostly stated in that first like long sentence there um, about her impactful role during that Great Migration. Okay, perfect. Let's do 8 and 9 as well here. I'll give you a few minutes for those. Okay. Claire, what are you thinking for 8?
I said A.
Yep. And Naomi, 9.
I didn't get to 9 yet.
Go ahead. Yeah, we take some more time.
C.
Yep. Perfect. Nice job. Good. Yeah, I'll start a timer here too for these next ones. Kind of we talked about earlier, on average, the question should take 1 minute and 11 seconds per question. So I'll give you guys like 2.5 minutes to answer these. I'll give you about 3, but I'll let you know when like the time is up, just so you can kind of time yourself. Go. All right, that's the 2 minutes and 22 seconds, but I'll give you guys a bit longer for these ones. They're a little longer questions rather than just like grammar. Cole, what do you think for number 10?
Number 10, I put D.
Yep, perfect. And Giuseppe, what do you think for number 11?
I put D.
Perfect. Nice. Okay. Also, if you guys ever have any questions, just like on why the answer or something, let me know. So yeah, cool. Yeah, and as far as like the minute and 11 seconds per question, that's like the average it should take. But obviously, like the grammar ones and the word choice ones are going to be a lot quicker, just because those we only usually have to read one sentence, whereas these, which are more of those main idea questions, those are going to take a little bit longer because you got to read a bit more. Okay, all right, here we got a graph one. I'll give you guys time you guys again. Go ahead and do these two. Yeah, that's the 222 again, but I'll give you guys a little bit longer. Okay. Macy, what do you think for number 12?
I said A.
Yep. And Claire for 13?
D.
Yeah, perfect. Any questions on those? All right. You guys are doing really good, so it's good. Yeah, we'll do these next two again. There's the 222 again. We'll give you like 30 more seconds. All right. For 14, Naomi, what do you think for that?
I think A.
Okay, this one would actually be D. So let's take a look at why that is. First, let's understand what the question is asking. Which quotation from the article about one night in Miami will be most effective evidence for the student to include in support of his claim? So first, we have to figure out what the student is claiming. And that's said here in the last sentence. The student claims that although Powers was inspired by this meeting, the film is best understood not as a precise retelling of historical events, but rather as a largely reimagined but informed representation. So basically, it's saying like it's not exactly what was happening, but um, he used some information and reimagined it. So A here, when Powers learned of the meeting, he initially planned to write a much longer work about its four famous participants rather than focusing on the meeting itself. Um, so I would say this doesn't really like necessarily relate to what the author is or the student is claiming here. Um, and I think the key is they're just understanding what he is claiming. But if you look at D, Powers could only find the most superficial historical details about the meeting, so he read extensively about the four individuals and their thinking at the time in an effort to portray what that might have happened to them. So yeah, that's kind of saying there, like he did some research, but he wasn't really able to find that much. So he tried to portray what happened best to them. So D would be the correct answer there. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. And then Cole, number 15.
I put B.
Yep. So this says that like basically they were trying to find out um, if it was made in the 1400s, but here they found that the ink was only used in stuff first produced in the 1900s. So like there's no way that could have been happened. So B is the correct answer there. Cool. Okay. Let me skip these ones. We did those. Sure. Let's just do 18 here. And then we'll move on to something else. Giuseppe, what do you think for this one?
C.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. Any questions on any of those? Alrighty. For the last bit here, I kind of wanted you guys to actually like get into some real practice. So I sent a link in the chat. Can you guys all open that? Is that working? Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll go to page, I think it's page where does it say page number? Page 16 there. Um, and that should be the start of module 2. And then I'll just have you guys, we're gonna do like chunks at a time now. And we're gonna like really practice the timing and like doing multiple questions at once, and you guys can move at your own pace. Um, so yeah, we'll do like the first half of this, or the first, sorry, like 4, 7. Sorry, let me see how many questions I want to do. So yeah, we'll do the first 13 questions, and I'll give you guys like 15 minutes to do those first 13. Um, everybody got to that page and we're all good? Everybody found the start of module 2? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Page 16 is like a couple questions in. You want us to start like exactly at number 1 for module 2 on 16?
Oh, okay, yeah. I guess it's page 14 if you're looking at the numbers actually on the like pages there. It's page 16 in the doc. If that
Okay,
makes
sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, the start on the first question there. Good question. Yeah. So I'll give you guys like 15 minutes. Try and get through those first 13 questions. Yeah. Go ahead and do that. Okay, we're at like the 8-minute mark, about halfway through. Two minutes left to finish those up. Alrighty. So that's about how long it should take to do those first 13. Uh, so yeah, we can go ahead and get into those. So yeah, I'll kind of just read out the answers here, and then um, if you guys just have any questions, stop me, and I can go over like why the answer was that, or maybe some tips or whatever you guys want. Um, so yeah, number one should be A, two should be B, three should be D, four should be C, five should be A, six should be B, seven should be B, eight should be C, nine is B, and that was that like double passage one. 10 is B, 11 is B, 12 is A, and 13 is D. Okay. Are there any questions on any of those?
Could we just talk about number 8?
Yeah, let me go. Go for that. Okay. Overall structure of the text. So if we kind of look at the beginning there, introducing that like mass phenomenon with the asteroid. And then the next part like talks about solar energy uh, and refutes it. And then finally, kind of like the last part there talks about how that the 647b or 778 Galt is shedding mass due to rotation. And then that's slightly correct. So the overall structure kind of introduces the phenomenon, then refutes it with two potential explanations, and then kind of presents like the third explanation there. So it's like that introduction, then contrasting, and then explains like the final observation. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Any other questions on those? Did you guys feel good about like the time as well? Okay, cool.
Can you go over 7, please?
Yeah. Number 7. The function of the underlined portion to the text as a whole. So for these questions, I like to like identify what the overall text is asking about first. So for these ones, I do usually read the little blip at the start as well. So autobiographed novel about a young girl living in Pittsburgh. And I remember I walked to memorize the neighborhood. I made a mental map and located myself upon it. At night in bed, I rehearsed the small worlds, scheme, and set challenges. Find the store using backyard only, imagine a route from the school to my friend's house. Okay. So kind of the text as a whole, it's just like I would say like kind of her like creative mind and like what she's coming up with there. Uh, and she's imagining like going through these different routes. So um, I wouldn't say like there's an overall like purpose or like argument the author's trying to make or something like that. It's kind of just like an explanation of this girl and like what she's doing, right? There's not like overall direction the author's trying to take this. So I think the most straightforward answer there like kind of makes sense. So B uh, provides examples of what the narrator thinks about at night. I mean, that's what it's doing. Pretty, there's not like a specific like argument or function that she's trying to make. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions there? Cool. We just have like 13 minutes left, so we'll do a few more questions. Let's just say five more, and I'll give you guys like 7 minutes to do those. Five more questions. So 14 through 18. If you guys want to do those quick, and then we'll go over those and I can kind of talk about them as well. Okay. Let's stop there. It was like 7 minutes. Um, I will again read off those answers for 14 through 18. See if you guys have any questions. So 14 is A, 15 is C, 16 is D, 17 is B, and 18 is D. Okay. Questions on any of those? Alrighty. If there are no questions, I'll kind of just wrap it up here. But yeah, you guys are doing really good. Sounds like everybody's kind of pacing themselves well and doing pretty good there. For homework, for the first thing I would say is just finish up this practice test here, and then I'll send out some more homework tomorrow. But yeah, just want to encourage you guys to keep working hard. I know like might not seem like there's too much of a point in doing it right now, but pays off in the end, and yeah, it can really have a big impact on where you go to college if you're really trying to get into somewhere or how much you pay for college. So yeah, keep encouraging you guys to study hard. I'll send out the homework and I will also submit this like recorded lecture. I'll send the video out. So, yeah. Do you guys have any final questions before we wrap things up here? Okay. Alrighty. Thank you guys for coming. Have a great week. Bye.